Wednesday, July 25th. I've just been with Alex, but I'll wait until about him at the end. First, Beth Ann. She called today and jabbered on for hours about that wonderful Carl Ray. That cabbage-headed old Carl Ray sent her a dozen roses. I asked her if she was absolutely sure they were from him, and she seemed a little offended. She said that there was a card with the flowers, and it said, "To Cleo from Tony." Huh? I said, "Cleo? Tony?" She giggled. "Our nicknames. I'm Cleopatra. He's Antony. Oh, Alpha and Omega." It took me about 10 minutes to quit gagging. I could not imagine Carl Ray standing in some florist shop writing out this card that says, "To Cleo from Tony." I mean, what would the storekeeper think? King of kings, supreme being. What happens to people? But then I started wondering why Alex and I hadn't given each other nicknames. And then I started wondering if maybe he didn't like me as much as Carl Ray likes Beth Ann. And then I started wondering why Alex hadn't sent me roses. Anyway, Beth Ann still has not heard from the jerk. If you ask me, she's too busy drooling over Carl Ray to care very much anymore. She sure forgot Derek the Divine quickly. Oh, and Beth Ann, my devoted best friend, has definitely decided to go to the GGP pajama party on Saturday night when I am off in West Virginia suffering through a week of Carl Ray. Some friend. So now, Alex, tonight I'm halfway between his house and my house, and then we walked back to his house. The big moment. I was going to meet his parents. All the way there, he told me about them. He said his dad would be very quiet and serious, and that his mother would be a little weird. When I asked him what he meant by weird, he said she changes moods quickly and dresses strangely sometimes and never sits still, but that she was really nice anyway. Mrs. Cheevy was standing in the driveway, aiming a bow and arrow at the garage when we walked up. She was wearing a black cocktail dress, pearls, and a pair of tennis shoes. On her head was a baseball cap. She shot a bow and arrow at the garage door. It landed right between one of the windows. "Bullseye!" she shouted. Then she heard us coming and turned around. "Oh, hi, she said, walking up to us. She was real pretty, with curly blonde hair and a sweet round face. She put her hand out to me. "Mary Lou," she said. "That's right, isn't it?" She was just smiling all over the place. She held out the bow and arrow. "Just practicing," she said. "Want to try?" I said, "Maybe later," but I smiled a lot, too. "Well, come in, she said. So we followed her inside. Alex lives in this enormous house on Lindale Street. The living room is about as big as our whole downstairs, and it looks at first as if it should be a picture in a magazine. But then, if you look more closely, you notice some strange things. Each set of windows has a different color of curtains. For example, red, gold, purple, black, peach, blue. On one side of the room, the furniture is all antique looking. A huge ornate couch in green velvety material, a gigantic wooden cupboard, 4 of those dainty little chairs that you would expect the little princesses to be sitting on, and lots of those little round tables with curved legs. Then, on the other side of the room, everything's modern. A long white couch, 2 leather and metal chairs that each look like an enormous S, and a long black coffee table with metal legs and a wavy top that looks like a great big noodle. Then the walls. On the antique side is this orange and green patterned wallpaper, and on the modern side, the walls are shiny yellow. One side of the room, guess which side, has 6 huge portraits of very stern-looking grandmothers and grandfathers, I guess. The other side had all kinds of interesting things on it. One of those paintings that looks like someone just stood back and flicked paint off a spoon, a stuffed pig's head, a white plaster sculpture of an arm and hand coming right straight out of a piece of tin, a pair of red cloth lips about 2 feet in diameter, with a stick of gum emerging from the center, and a long shelf, maybe 6 feet long, with hundreds and hundreds of little pebbles on it. Mrs. Cheevy said, "Sit down, sit down, sit down!" And she motioned us to the antique side of the room. We sat down. "Oh," she said, "I just love it, love it, love it when Alex brings someone home." And then she started calling for her husband. "Oh, Ralph, Ralph, Ralph!" Pretty soon, Ralph came in. Whoa. He's about 7 feet tall, about as tall and skinny as anyone I have ever met. First, I saw his feet coming down the stairs, and they were enormous. He wore gigantic leather sandals. Then I saw his legs coming down the stairs. He wore blue jeans, and his legs just kept coming and coming. I didn't think there was a body attached. Then I saw hands and arms hanging down, these long, swinging things in a red plaid shirt. Pretty soon, a long neck, and then, surprisingly, a rather small head. I was glad that it was a small head because I was beginning to think a giant was coming down the steps. His face is pale and freckled, and he has brown hair. He stepped into the room. "Oh, Ralph, Ralph, Ralph," Mrs. Cheevy said. "This is Mary Lou." He nodded, but before he moved any farther, he motioned to the other side of the room with his hands. Alex and Mrs. Cheevy automatically got up, so I did too. And then we all went and sat on the other side of the room. But as soon as we sat down, Mrs. Cheevy jumped back up and left the room. Mrs. Cheevy said, "Son," I liked that, like the way he said "son" and all so formal and all. "Do you and Mary Lou have plans for this evening?" Alex said, "Yeah." Then Mrs. Cheevy came rushing back in the room with a plate of oysters. Ugh. I'd never eaten oysters, and I didn't really feel like starting today, but it didn't look like I had any choice. She balanced the plate of oysters on 2 of the waves of the noodle-like table and went rushing out again. Then she came back in with some purple napkins, cloth, and handed us each one and sat down. Then she got back up and passed the plate of oysters around. We had each swallowed 1 oyster when Mrs. Cheevy jumped up again and said, "Oh, Ruff, Ruff, Ruff! The time! It's so late, late, late!" She was already up and halfway out of the room. Alex said, "Well, I'm glad you got to meet Mr. Cheevy. Stood up, Mary Lou Finney," he said, and put out his hand, and I quickly wiped off the oyster juice on my purple napkin and put my hand out, and he gently crushed all my fingers in his enormous hand. Already Miss Cheevy was back, carrying a green parka, which she put over her shoulders. She was still wearing the black cocktail dress, pearls, baseball hat, and tennis shoes. Mr. Cheevy was still wearing his jeans and plaid shirt and sandals. They left, just like that. They left. Alex said, "They're real nice, honest, once you get to know them." "Wow," I said. Alex and I were alone in his house. I started examining the things on the walls, the pig's head, and the shelf with the pebbles on it, and the big pair of red lips with the gum sticking out of the center. Can you imagine practicing kissing on those huge lips? I think Alex was more nervous than I was because he was shuffling all around. We did try sitting on the long white couch, but we felt pretty silly sitting there on that huge couch in the middle of that enormous room. So finally, Alex suggested we go to the tasty phrase. It was a relief, to tell you the truth. And then, just to show you that it must be true about the quiet, romantic places not being all they are cracked up to be. Wouldn't you know it? When we got out on the street and were passing Artie's Automotive, that's when he put his arm on my shoulders again. Here is something from my manual. When the guy puts his arm around the girl while walking along, the girl might find it more comfortable to also put her arm around him at this time. She can put it sort of across his back. It is a little difficult to walk this way, and you won't want to walk very far like this, but it's a neat thing to do. The girl will find it difficult to think things to say during this time, but the boy will carry on about something or other, basketball, for example, and the girl can get by with saying or ah or oh. This way she can concentrate primarily on not tripping. When other people do these things, it looks so easy. Don't let that fool you. Enough. I leave for West Virginia with Carl Ray the day after tomorrow. Grown. Temptations and Choices, Book 12 of the Odyssey. Wow. What an action-packed chapter. First, Odysseus and his men pass by the sirens who bewitch everyone who comes near them with their singing. Clever Odysseus blocks up his men's ears with wax. He wants to listen, though, so he has his men tie him up to the mast and orders them not to untie him, no matter how hard he might beg. If this is a metaphor, I think that the sirens represent sexy women who tempt men, like Eve with Adam. I don't think I am a siren yet. I can hardly speak when I'm with Alex, let alone sing. Then Odysseus' ship has to go between these two dangerous obstacles. One is Scylla, a horrible monster with 12 feet and 6 necks and 6 heads and 3 rows of teeth in each head, and she eats men from ships. The other obstacle is Charybdis, a whirlpool that sucks up whole ships. Odysseus can't get through without going close to one, but finally he decides to risk Scylla. Scylla snatches up about 6 of Odysseus' men and eats them up. I think that maybe Scylla and Charybdis represent 2 different difficult choices, and that you have to take the choice that offers least harm. Maybe? Does that sound right?